Welcome to Lecture 9, Part 2 of Animal Cognition. We're going to continue our discussion of long-term memory, and last time we discussed semantic memory, and this time we're going to be discussing episodic memory, and whether at least some animals possess episodic memories, or what we'll call episodic-like memories. Episodic memory, as you might recall, refers to memories for specific personally experienced events. And this is different from memories for facts and basic knowledge. Right? So for humans, an episodic memory is a memory for personally experienced events. When you entertain an episodic memory, you're basically traveling back in time, so to speak, right? You're consciously reflecting on a previous event. And these events are encoded with respect to certain episodic details, specifically the time, like when something happened, where it happened, who was there, what the cause of the action was, and so on. So you might have episodic memories regarding your senior prom, for example. Right? You might remember where it was, what time of year it was, who you danced with, and so on. So the research question for animal cognition, folks, is whether animals can remember episodes in the past, right, complete with key episodic details. And one of the first studies to look at this was by Clayton and Dixon, and they examined episodic memories in western scrub jays. And they specifically examined whether western scrub jays possess what they call episodic-like memories. Now, episodic-like memories are memories that capture certain episodic details, right? Certain episodic information, like when an event occurred, where it occurred, and what it consisted of. The reason why they call these episodic-like memories is because we don't know whether the animals are actually consciously reminiscing about these events. Right? So we don't know whether they're having that subjective experience that we have when they're retrieving an episode. So they hold off on calling these episodic memories. So in their study, they had scrub jays cache food in their lab, and the food could be cached in basically an ice cube tray with different compartments, each filled with sand. And they used Lego-like bricks as landmarks so that the birds could try to remember where they stored them. And they gave the birds two different kinds of food to cache, either peanuts or waxworms. So first, the birds were given 15 minutes to cache the peanuts in one tray, and then they were given 15 minutes to cache the waxworms in another tray located elsewhere in the lab. So after the caching trials, the birds were removed from the lab, and what they manipulated was not just what food was cached, but also how long they were removed from the lab for. So either 4 hours or 124 hours. And an important thing to keep in mind is that generally the waxworms are much more desirable to the birds, right? Much more protein and so on. But they're only good for about 4 hours. So their desirability decreases very quickly with time. After 4 hours, they're no good to them. The peanuts, being less desirable overall, would be more desirable to them after 4 hours. So the birds were allowed back into the lab, and both trays were presented at their original locations. And the researchers recorded, right? So the dependent variable here is where do the birds prefer to look for food at the time of retrieval. And what they found is that at 4 hours, the birds prefer to search for food at the waxworm location, right, where they had cached the worms. In contrast, at 124 hours, the birds prefer to look for food at the peanut location, right, where the peanuts have been cached. So what they say is that the birds were remembering what they buried, where they buried it, and when they did so, right? That's crucial episodic information, right? If they weren't storing this information, including the time, their behavior would be random. It would be chance where they go looking for food. So a question that the astute student might ask is, well, maybe at 124 hours the birds or the waxworms really start to smell. So what they're doing is relying on perception, and they're avoiding the nasty smell of the worms. Clayton and Dixon considered this possibility and ruled it out with further controls. What they did was they removed the worms, they removed the peanuts, and cleaned everything so that there was no possible smell. And even under this condition, at 4 hours they preferred to look in the waxworm where the waxworms had been cached, and at 124 hours they preferred to look where the peanuts had been cached. So clearly they're relying on an episodic like memory instead of relying on perception to solve the problem. Now, again, I want to hammer this point, right? They may not be full-blown episodic memories, since episodic memories, at least in us, includes this subjective experience of reliving the past, like what's been called mental time travel. And we have no evidence for this taking place, right? And with humans, we know because they can tell us, right? They can tell us that they're re-experiencing, they're reliving an event. But there is no such language that we can use with animals to tell us what they're experiencing. And because we can only attribute mental states that we need in order to explain the behavior, that's why Clayton and Dixon like to attribute to these birds episodic like memories. Anything else would violate Morgan's canon. So this has been found with the western scrub jays, but can we see something similar in other animals, right? So how widely distributed are these types of episodic-like memories? And since the Clayton and Dixon study, it's been studied in many species, including rats, pigeons, and monkeys, and also examined in great apes by Martin Ordas and colleagues. And they tested 7 chimpanzees, 3 orangutans, and 2 bonobos using modified versions of the Clayton and Dixon tasks. And they studied whether great apes encode information about what is hidden, where, and when. And they had 2 types of food, right? Frozen juice, like a frozen juice pop, which is delicious but very perishable, right? It melts and then becomes inaccessible. And an actual grape, which is good, not as sweet, but it's good, but it's less perishable than the frozen pop. Now they used the frozen juice and the grapes because the apes had a lot of experience with these foods. They were common treats for them. And the apes were taken to the lab where there was a platform with 3 baiting sites, right? 3 locations where the food could be hidden. And 2 of these sites were baited with the apes watching. One with the frozen juice and one with the grapes. Right, so they watched the food being hidden in these one of these 2 locations. And then the apes were taken away for either 5 minutes or 1 hour. Now keep in mind that the frozen juice pop would melt quickly and become unobtainable at 1 hour, while the grapes would remain good after an hour. So if the apes remember what was hidden, where, and when, they should be more likely to search where the juice had been at 5 minutes than 1 hour. And in contrast, they should be more likely to search the grape site after 1 hour than after 5 minutes. And these predictions were confirmed, right? So the predictions were confirmed for grapes and for the juice. The grape, we see that's the black bar. The likelihood of looking in the grape location increases at 1 hour relative to 5 minutes, while the likelihood of searching in the juice pop location decreases from 5 minutes to 1 hour. Okay, it's not a huge decrease, but it is statistically significant. So the results are in the direction that's predicted. All right, so what this suggests is that the grapes encode information about what is hidden where and when the hiding took place. And this information is activated, right? They use this information to guide their behavior about where to look for food. Again, this is an episodic-like memory. And we can't conclude that they're full-blown episodic memories because we don't know their subjective experiences while they're engaging in these tasks. All right, so in this part of the lecture, we looked at episodic memories, and we saw that there's evidence for episodic-like memories in several species, several branches of the animal kingdom.